Okay, before the Fianna, before Finn McCool himself, there were the Tuatha gods, Ireland's shining gods, the Tuatha. So legend says that Brigid, the daughter of Danu and Dagda, heard the earth sing and dream of beauty. So she said to Angus, let's go down there and check it out. Nuada said, I'll go first, I've got my sword of light. And you know who Nuada was? He was the first High King of Ireland. That's right, Nuada. He came down with Brigid. And do you know who else? Manannán, the sea god. Yep, the one they named the Isle of Man after. So who else came was Angus, the ever young, Gobnu the smith. And remember, he's the one who ends up killing Brigid's son, Ruadan. That song we've already done here. But the important thing is, you have to know that as soon as they touched Ireland's soil, they faced monsters. Well, right after Brigid met the Morrigan. So here we had Nuada, who was the first king of Ireland, and he was in this first battle. And guess what? He lost his arm to the Firbolg named Shreng. So all these gods came down, boom, one of them loses his arm. And by Geisha, a king of Ireland had to be whole or unblemished. So Nuada, he was brave and loved, everybody loved him, but he was wounded, so he had to step aside. So his crown passed to Brez the Beautiful, who is half Fomor. And guess who he married? Brigid. She wanted to keep the peace, so between the two tribes, boom, she married this beautiful Fomor, who was like a monster guy. And they had Ruadan, who ended up getting killed by the smith, and it wasn't the smith's fault, really. Ruadan was doing something backhanded. So there we had the first marriage of light and shadow. And whatever geisha they came down with, that's Ireland's oldest lesson. Break the geisha, and even the gods can fall. But remember that gorgeous Nuada god with the no arm? Guess what? The healer that came with them too, Dian Cécht, he created a silver arm. He was the master of healing that came down with all of the Tuatha gods. And he forged a silver arm that was gleaming and strong in the mythologies. It was a marvel of godly technology. And what do you think about that? Isn't that just completely crazy? We're talking about thousands of years ago. This guy who came here, calling himself a god, had a new silver arm by one of the healers. And silver's not flesh though, right? So Nuada was still not whole. So there we had Brigid and Brez taken over. But Dian, the healer, had his son Miach and a daughter. They were both healers too. But you know what Miach did? He had herbs and sacred knowledge, and he grew Nuada a living arm, a flesh and bone arm. So he restored his arm so he could become king again. Now, have you ever heard that? Isn't that crazy? But that's what happened in the mythologies. And from that wound, it gets even crazier. You won't believe the end of this story. So what happened was, pride is deadly. And this is something that we all know. Pride is like that bile that comes into the earth, right? And it can seep in and take over a whole community. So you always have to be aware of pride. And what happened this time? The father killed his son. He smashed him and killed him because he was jealous that his son had created this beautiful new arm for the king with the herbs and his sacred knowledge. So what happened was, from Miach's grave sprang 365 herbs, one for each day and one for each joint of the body. That was what the saying was. And so we've determined what is possibly the 365 herbs. If you want to hear, we'll put out one every day, so we'll have a catalog of them on our website. But this Miach's grave, he had herbs and secrets, and they've been lost to time. So now, thankfully, with all the herbologists and people that are into holistic medicine and everything, there's easy to research. So here we have access to Miach's secrets. And from that wound in the Tuatha story, Irish healing was born. Anybody here have an Irish grandma who may have known that there's nothing like a good cup of tea? And so what was in the teas? Which tea was your grandma's favorite to give you when you had a cold? Like that kind of thing. But remember, I promised you it only gets stranger. So has anybody heard about the flying ship of Manannán? Well, it was the flying ship of the Tuatha. So centuries later, after all this went down, one of Finn's closest companions told St. Patrick a story. Remember, Oisin was his son? So the two of them, Keltay and Oisin, told St. Patrick the Fianna were out hunting when they saw a glowing ship sail across the sky. So this is written down in the 1200s, okay, by the monks. So they're talking about the Fianna seeing glowing ships sailing across the sky, a ship that rides the sea, the land, and the air. And who was at its helm but Manannán MacLear, the prince of the Tuatha. So he invited them to come aboard, and they accepted. And in a flash, they're carried to a mystic island where warriors rise from the Sidhe. So the Sidhe, that's the way that you say the name of the other people from the other world. But these aren't ordinary foes for the Fianna. They shapeshift into birds, into wolves, and even into living flames. And guess what? The Fianna do what they were best at. They fight, and they win. So as a reward, Manannán